Thanks everyone, it's really lovely to be here. My presentation tonight is all about homework, and as we know, the minute we mention that word it conjures up all sorts of thoughts, feelings, debates and discussions. The whole presentation is about me not giving homework anymore, so I'll take you through a few things and a few changes that I've made over the years. Quick little bit about me, I'm a learner foremost. Love learning, doesn't matter what it is. If it's something new, I'm quite passionate about it. I'm also a teacher. Lead nut. I was at the RSCon 5 mini conference the other night that started at 1 in the morning. It was fantastic. If you get a chance to catch up on the recordings, I'll put a link to those up at the end as well. They talked about being the lead nut in change and trying to make change, and often that's what we're seen as when we are trying to do something a little bit different, and the homework one certainly was. Passionate about blended e-learning. I'm starting out as a consultant. I was in the classroom up until August 14th last year. I have been teaching for about 17 years, have taught all levels from year 2 through to year 8. It doesn't matter what level, love the lot of them, they're fantastic. But I got quite sick last year, so I had to make a few changes. One of the results is that I don't have any hearing in my left ear, so it makes it a little bit of a challenge when I'm working with students and in a noisy classroom. Passionate about literacy, and I was supposed to finish my master's paper last year, my last one, but of course I couldn't because I was sick, so I've got an extension to finish that, and it should be all done and dusted in July, hopefully. Right, this wee dude. My dog ate my website. I have been told in the past, I've had students say the dog chewed through the cable for the computer, which is always a bit of a challenge. Just take a wee moment and think about all the excuses that you get each week about why homework isn't finished, it's not done, they couldn't do it, all the different things that we hear. There have been some very good ones over the years. I'm sure you've got quite a few that you could share as well. And take a wee moment to think about why we actually give homework. It can be a few of the following things. It can reinforce what we do in learning at school. It's good practice and good practice. Parents and caregivers want it, but often they're the ones coming in saying that they are having the battles with their students. I have a 25-year-old, and I can remember countless battles over homework and wondering why on earth we give it. Couple of links on there that you might be interested in on the sort of the opposite side of the fence and why homework is important and the purpose of homework. You might find those quite interesting to read. I'm sure if you're anything like me, when you read through it, you can think of an argument against every one of them, but I'll leave that up to you. There tend to be 3 different homework types generally over the past few years, or in history I guess. A single sheet with lots of different activities on it, and everyone in the class gets one of these, whether it's their passion or interest or not, and often what's on those isn't really passionate or interesting. The projects that go on for 6 weeks that either the children complete, or if you're really, really lucky, the parents complete them for them. Homework that makes an attempt at an individualised program of learning. What I used to do, I had activities to support in-class learning that they were differentiated to a certain extent, but not as well as they could be, not as well as what was happening in the classroom. They had reading and spelling. Maths wasn't differentiated as well as it could be, and I was quite frustrated about that. I didn't feel I was doing as good a job as I possibly could. And of course we had activities that were always linked to our current inquiry. Another wee bit of my background, I've always been a digital teacher. I was part of a longitudinal study with Derek Wenmouth back in 2000, and my students have always used tools to support their learning and to impact their learning in a positive way. And yet here I was doing the complete opposite with homework because it depended on school policy and all those different things. Sometimes I think it was received like this, no matter how great I thought it was. And in fact, the students were usually really honest, didn't matter what age, and it wasn't engaging them, it wasn't stimulating, it wasn't motivating. Why was it important to change? And this came about probably about 8 years ago. I started to think I've got to make a change, there's got to be something different out there that I should be doing. Students were completing it with compliance. They weren't intrinsically motivated to learn, and I am very, very passionate about helping students become intrinsically motivated to learn and just have that absolute love of learning, and it wasn't happening. It wasn't individualised or challenging enough, and I was spending pretty much all of my Saturday from early in the morning till late at night responding and giving feedback to absolutely everything in the homework. Yes, they took time out to read it on Monday, but that's not effective feedback, as we know. So there were changes that needed to happen. Student feedback showed me, and also observations showed me, the learning wasn't happening the way I thought it was happening. It's not retained, it's not created, and that was my biggest thing. I wanted them to be creating learning inside and outside of school. So I wanted to challenge their thinking, encourage them to take responsibility for it. I knew I could do a better job of what I was doing. I knew there had to be other possibilities, and it was a complete mismatch of my beliefs and practice in the classroom. It just wasn't matching up at all, so it needed to change. And the alternatives. I've spoken a little bit about the digital tools and what I've done with that. I began with the students' individual learning needs and wanted to match that up with what was happening at home. I wanted to completely differentiate what we were doing and do it in a different way so that it wasn't homework, it was more engaging, it was actually having an impact on their thinking in class. So I challenged what has always been done like this, so it always works, thinking it clearly wasn't working. It was a hard battle to change that because school policy sometimes can be a little bit restrictive, as we know. I wanted consistency. I wanted a two-way process. I didn't want classroom walls. We communicated globally with people every day, but here we were busy. Giving them tasks and things that didn't match up with what they were doing in the classroom. Using student voice to make a change. So talking to the students, I did a lot of work with the students, a lot of research about what we could do differently, and they came up with some great ideas too that involved their e-pals for a start in the States. Researching the options, we've got the flipped classroom, personalised learning, developing a blended e-learning culture of anywhere, anytime learning. And as I say, it started about 8 years ago when I was still in Invercargill. Worked at a fantastic school which really did encourage doing things outside the square. So we had to change our thinking quite a little bit. It had to change for everybody, teachers, students, parents, BOT. We were the guinea pigs, and we had to be able to justify that it was working, and we had to be able to show evidence of it working quite quickly. I don't give homework anymore. There are a couple of links there. The first one's to a blog post on my professional learning blog that got quite a discussion going recently when I put that up there, and there's also from the Teach Thought community, which I'm involved in and some of you may know about, some alternatives to homework, a chart for teachers. There are some very good things on there, but there are also some very Americanized things in terms of their standards, but it does have some quite useful ideas. So I give prep for learning, short for preparation for learning. I wanted kids to be engaged in what we were doing in the classroom before they got there, before we started our tuning in and our inquiry. I wanted to find different ways to extend that tuning in process and also involve their families. So it's about connections, interactions, questioning. Might be time to finish, is it? I'll have to check. Creating and sharing knowledge, it's passion for learning, and it's critical thinking. It's planning ahead, what learning is coming up, what skills do my students need, what questions can I ask to engage them deeply in their learning. I'll leave you to read all that. It's the nuts and bolts of what we do and why we do it. It's real and relevant connections to each other locally and globally, inside and outside of school. Okay, but does it work? Student engagement on the class learning blogs was high. This was all my evidence for this working, including student voice. Participation in class learning and discussion showed evidence of thinking and research. The whole class climate changed. I had kids that couldn't wait to get to school to talk about what they'd been talking about through their Google Doc conversations and Google Chat the night before, or through the blog conversations and comments that we'd had. Students were reading a lot more widely, which was a goal that we had. We wanted extended vocab. It seemed to be doing all of that as well in their writing. And the feedback from students and parents was very, very positive. And that is me on that one. If you have questions, please ask. It is a different way of thinking, and yeah, that's it from me.